Yeah, so the way we looked at it, like even from the beginning, when 38 Studios was founded, uh, we had our office in Maynard, Massachusetts, and it was a company built to make an MMO. We hired MMO people, but we working with Bob Salvatore and the story team, we knew early on that what we were building in terms of a history and a lore for the world was bigger than one game, even a game as big as an MMO. And so we developed these tens of thousands of years of history. And uh, by doing that, we looked at these different ages of history, and we thought, this particular period would be really great for a single player RPG. This period would be really awesome for an RTS game. This period would be great for an MMO. And we wanted to create this history that would serve as the basis for an ecosystem of games. And when the opportunity came to acquire Big Huge Games, they had a single player RPG engine, but their IP was really weak. And it created a great opportunity for us to take this IP that we had and bring it to life in that engine. And so Reckoning told this very single player focused story that was still tied in thematically to what you were going to experience in the MMO. So if you played Reckoning, it was the story of being awakened, the first person awakened by this well of souls and brought back to life after having been killed. And it was that story, examining the implications of that we're going to come into play on a massive scale in the MMO, because fast forward to the time of the MMO, now the gnomes had created wells of souls all over the world. And so heroes were being brought back to life. And finding out what was behind that, what the mystery was behind what powered the well of souls, the trials that were facing the world. And it was really going to be about exploring all those facets of story. So it was just something that we, because of what happened with the company, we unfortunately didn't get to tell the conclusion of that story. Well, yeah, I think, player agency is one of those things that you almost took for granted in the EverQuest days, because there was no single storyline kind of leading you through it. You discovered things on your own, and no one was telling you where to go or what to do. They weren't saying that there was a camp over the hill where there were people with question marks over their heads that you could take their quests and stuff. It was just like, find the place in the world that is right for your level and do stuff. And when EverQuest 2 and WoW were both being developed kind of simultaneously, it's interesting that both of them gravitated towards quests as the thing that was going to guide people through the world. And it seemed, at the time, like, oh, this is a great way to tell story. This is, finally all these things that we wanted players to see and understand, we'll be able to lay out in front of them. And it certainly did that. It presented the story in a way that hadn't been possible in Ultima Online or EverQuest. But unfortunately, it also did it in a way that made it kind of get in the way of gameplay. So when we were looking at the next generation of MMOs beyond that, going back to that sense of allowing players to find the story in the world was something certainly that we wanted to do on EverQuest Next, and also wanted to do in a different way on Copernicus. I always say that you're onto something good with a story when the story almost tells you what needs to happen. We were at 38 Studios. We were in a design meeting one day, and we're talking, because we had this multi-year story arc that was all planned out for Amalur. And we had this big city that you may have seen screenshots of that's called Valiance. And it was like the center of all the order races, all the good races. And it was this beautiful capital, this sprawling city, and a huge statue towering over it. And we were talking about the events that were going on in the world. And through the course of our conversation, we realized that Valiance was going to have to be destroyed in the course of the story. And we tried, like, well, no, we can't do it. We don't want, because we didn't want to. We love the city that we're making. We had invested all this history, all this time, all this stuff. But the story could not be denied. that had to be what happened. So I'll use an example from 38. So we were doing something, again, parallel development. We had these ideas for these big world-changing events. And we had this chapter-driven storyline that was going to play out over a series of years. And we wanted those events to have divergence in them. So a given server may go one way, it may go a different way. And those repercussions would live throughout the life of that server. But that does raise the question of what becomes canon, which way becomes the authoritative way. And so what the challenge for us became, we wanted to acknowledge that there were these outcomes in the world, but we didn't want to branch infinitely off of branches. That drove engineers crazy. They were like, wait, you want to do what? And you're like, because they need to manage all this stuff. You need to have servers that know the state of the world, and they need to bring that to life. And if you're diverging off of divergences, things will go crazy very quickly. So the way we structured the story was that the through line was going to play through itself. It was going to reach certain points where these big events would happen, and it didn't matter. While the outcome of the previous chapters was going to have an impact on the world and would make things feel very different, it didn't cause these new events that were coming to break. So you just have to be really cognizant of the effects of the story that you're telling and structure things in a way to take into account what you want to do in terms of the branching storylines. And if you're smart about it, you can construct a story that way that still allows all that player agency to happen while still keeping things manageable for your server guys and all the people who are responsible for maintaining that state of the world in the game. Wow. Well, at 38, I wanted to address that kind of stuff in the story, so I just made it so that the races couldn't intermingle in that way and produce offspring. The only exception being the dark elves and light elves, and we had a story for why the dark elves had become dark elves, like every fantasy story does, I suppose.
That sounds familiar. Did I read an ebook about that recently?
You may have. I certainly.
I don't know. I think your name was in the forward.
It wasn't the same reason, but I wanted to come to the same conclusion, which was that if a dark elf and a light elf did reproduce, it would be a dark elf offspring all the time, because it was just easier that way, and it also fit the theme of the race. Talk about the dwarves that we had in that game, because he brings up dwarves a lot as an example, and so one of the thing that we were doing with dwarves that was going to be different was our dwarves were pirates. They were seafaring. They weren't, while they could do stone and steel and all that kind of stuff, they were more into raiding and stealing other people's stuff. And they were feared throughout the world because when their ships would show up on the horizon, you knew that you were in trouble. Like they might be there to make a deal with you, but more likely than not, they were going to find a way to take your stuff from you. And so our dwarves were very much they were tattooed, and their beards had, they were pirate dwarves in a way, and they tended to be much darker in skin tone and have have braids and cornrows and stuff. That their hair was a lot different than you would see on the typical Tolkien dwarves and that sort of thing. So I would have contributed an illustration or screenshot of them, but the state of Rhode Island might sue me or something. So just take my word for it that our dwarves were pretty cool. They were badasses, and I wish people had a chance to experience them in a game.